Welcome, guys, to the second part of Heavy Metal Tones Odyssey and dive into Genesis' great, wonderful classic concept album, A Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. I hope you enjoyed the little special episode I put out for my fans and for the just for music lovers in general. The interview with Richie Faulkner. I really had a good time talking to him for Metal Ruse. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. It was only a short one, but you know, it's always nice to have something different. So, part two. What did we learn in part one? Well, what we learned in part one, a little reprisey, if you haven't listened to the episode, we learned about where it was recorded, what systems it was recorded on, issues that they had within the band and within the typical sort of partnerships and friendships that happen in life. We're together for a long time and issues occur and people get sort of edgy with each other. It all works out towards in the end, doesn't it? It worked out to sort of to the combination of one, in my opinion, the greatest concept album of them all, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. It's an album, guys, that I don't know if I sort of mentioned this in the last episode, but it's an album. There's not one you can just dive in and dive out. There are some quote unquote singles that came off it, Counting Out Time and so on, but it's not. And individually, they're great pieces of music. But really, this is the kind of album, very much like any good concept album, like Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Although I wouldn't call it a concept album, but that album in itself, you do need to listen to it as one entire piece of music. Very much like a lot of the 70s prog albums. They weren't something you could take a single off. There was something you had to, like Camel, for instance, Camel's Snow Goose, that has to be just put on. Yeah, you've got to turn it over if you've got it on vinyl, but that's okay. It gives you a moment to get yourself a cup of tea and go back to it. Or a beer or whiskey or whatever you want, a new cigarette, whatever you choose to do. Now, I mean, of course, you can now stream them and doesn't need any break. It sort of takes away the romance slightly, but, hey, we talked about that in the past. But so I think this is one of the greatest of the concept albums. Now, in the first part, we talked about that. The second part, we're going to talk about the storyline and the music itself. I'm not going to go too far into technically the music because I think it's such a complex piece of music that couldn't do it justice. I think I want you to listen to the music itself, of your own free will, and then but possibly go in with this idea of the story, because the story is quite complicated. Now I'm going to go. This is quite wordy, this episode. Sorry, guys. Because it's a lot of written down stuff I have to repeat out. So if I feel like I'm getting a bit monotone or I'm speaking like that, I apologise, all right? I'll do my best. I'll try and inflect where I can, all right? Sorry. Okay, up and down into my volume. And then you won't feel so like you fall asleep, like, oh God, he's talking about it. So where do we start? Okay, Gabriel used New York as a tool to make Rael more real. You try and say that quite quickly, Rael, more real. And more extrovert and violent, choosing to develop a character that is least likely a person to fall into the pansy claptrap, aiming for a story that contrasted between fantasy and character. He explained that as the story progressed, Rael finds he is not as butch as he hoped, and his experiences eventually bring out a more romantic side in his personality. Now, I thought about this, and after reading this, and it's very... This whole album, I think, is so autobiographical on Gabriel's part, more so than ever before I've ever thought, actually. And it wasn't until I sort of sat down and really, really listened to the lyric in, absolute sort of concentration levels to see, because, you listen to albums and sometimes the lyric goes past and you think that's a nice nuance, it's a nice movement with the music, but you don't catch its intricacies, and this album has a lot of that. Okay, Gabriel deliberately kept the ending ambiguous in the drama, but clarified that Rael does not die, although he compared the ending to a build-up of a suspense of a drama in a film, which is true. I think it's very cinematic as it goes. I think, it's a very cinematic album. Again, that's why I think you need to I mean, I do it in a sensory deprivation kind of way. That sounds weird, guys. I don't mean, there's a couple of things that I do. Let you into a little secret. So I either run a hot bath, get in. I know not everyone likes a bath, but I just get in the bath, headphones on, music playing. Of course, I have to use the smartphone for that because I can't get out of the bath to turn the record over. And then I just I get a I get a face cloth, like a flannel, right? And I put it across my eyes. And if it's at night time, I turn the light off. It's during the day, I put a face cloth over my eyes and I lie there and listen. And I really try and fall away into the music. And otherwise, what I tend to do is I'll lie on a bed with my headphones on with eye covers, or in the dark, depending again. And because I find that if I've got too much outside of my vision, so I'm looking at things, I'll daydream, I will go somewhere else. But if I've got most of my senses blocked off, I find I get more out of it. I mean, worth you trying, guys. It's really worth doing. And not so much maybe with some really sort of heavy metal might not work as well, but in the more sort of subtle music that you might choose in your library, it's worth doing. I mean, you can still do it with really heavy stuff. I have done it. I just don't get as much out of it because you don't have time to take your breath with it. Anyway, right. There's several of the stories, occurrences, and settings derived from Gabriel's own dreams, as I said. So I still feel this is very, because it's very, very autobiographical. Collins remarked that the entire concept album, that's Phil Collins, was a split personality. The individual songs also make satirical allusions to mythology, sexual revolution, advertising, and consumerism. As I mentioned in the previous episode, he talks about some characters in some of the songs, or they're not characters, they're real people that I'd never even heard of. Marshall McGowan and all these sort of people. Again, listen back to this previous episode if you haven't, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Gabriel felt the songs alone were not enough to detail all of the action in his story, so he wrote a full plot on the album sleeve, and that is true. I have sat and read that. I have read that word for word, I don't know how many times in my life, and it never quite makes sense to me. But, that's okay, right, guys? Because that's the whole point of this album, this whole experience for you, listener, and me. To go back over it and to do that sensory deprivation thing, and sit there. And often as well, when I do that, I like to have a glass of single malt whiskey. Now, if you're not a drinker, that's fine. You can do whatever you want. But I find that really it calms me as well. And then I think of the drink flavour and not the environment around me as well. It sounds all hippy-dippy, but it's how I've always been able to see beyond just the musical notes in records. I've done it for a very long time, and I think that it's up since I was probably at 15 or 16, and it's well worth doing. Anyway, so let's get to the plot summary. Right now, this is a bit, as I go through, each part of the plot will coincide with a track on the album, and I'll tell you the track names as we get to them. There's a lot of tracks on the album, as you can imagine. It's 4 sides of vinyl, although as I did discover, it was released in Canada as single-sided, because that's what originally Peter Gabriel wanted. He wanted individual albums, and I knew I had one, and I went looking for it, and I don't have it anymore. I must have left it in the UK when I emigrated to Australia, because I left a lot of records there, because I was looking at, couldn't take everything with me, and I think because I already had the double, I didn't think about the single, and I wasn't really thinking about it now. I mean, God knows what it'd be worth, but if it's still available, if there's any around, I mean, I don't even know if I imagined it. I just remember having the single version of it, the first 2 sides. Anyway, plot summary of this amazing album. One morning in New York City, Rael is holding a can of spray paint. Hating everyone around him, he witnesses a lamb lying down on Broadway, which was a profound effect on him, and that's the voice of the lamb lies down on Broadway, the title track. A side note, there was a lot of talk about lamb being an issue for the name. I don't know why. I think there was maybe a Muslim thing. I don't know. Sorry if I'm not trying to. I don't know much about that sort of thing, but I just read that there was issues with calling it the lamb lies down on Broadway, and the metaphor for the lamb. And Gabriel says he had an illusion. He saw a lamb a dream, and he saw a lamb lying on Broadway, down on the street. So I think that's basically it. Nothing more than nothing less. As he walks along the street, he sees a dark cloud take the shape of a movie screen and slowly move towards him, finally absorbing him. Fly on a Windshield, favourite song on the album, one of my favourite songs on the album, and brilliant live. See an explosion of images of the current day Broadway melody of 1974. That's the second track. Third track, before he wakes up in a cave and falls asleep once again. That's Cocoon, Cocoon. That's a catchy number. I mean, you know, for all of the heaviness and intellectual nuances of this album and of prog in general, they do make catchy songs. So Cocoon. Sorry, Cuckoo. Oh, Tony. Cocoon. Rel wakes up and finds himself trapped in a cage of stalactites and stalagmites, which slowly close in towards him. As he tries to escape, he sees many other people in many other cages before spotting his brother John outside. Rel calls to him, but John walks away and the cage suddenly disappears. And that's In the Cage. A wonderful piece of Gabriel singing. He sings the high notes, you know, and he goes, in the cage. Oh man, I can't give it any, you know, people going, oh, cat's screwing, Tony. No, I can't sing, but that is, it's a beautiful piece. It's quite sad, and it's really lonely as a piece of music thing. And of course the band fill that soundscape with such a sort of ominous tone. I still think this is Collins' best drumming ever, right? Ever. But the phone's ringing again. 1 second. There we go. It's gone now. Now, Rel finds himself on the floor of a factory and is given a tour of the area by a woman, where he watches people being processed like packages. He spots old members of his New York City gang, also John with number 9 stamped on his forehead. Fearing for his life, Rel escapes into a corridor, and then we have the grand parade of lifeless packaging. This one, weirdly, and I think it's because of Another Brick in the Wall, the animated video for that, the video clip with the hammers all walking around. In my head, when I listen to this song, I see those images. I just see the hammers walking. And I don't know why. It just, as I said, so lying there in the dark, that's what I see. And now when I listen to it, I can't unsee it. Again, a great allegory on consumerism. Really, really, almost sort of as well. Have you seen the movie Soylent Green? Or if you know the movie Soylent Green, or even Logan's Run, or things like that, it has that feel to it, right? And has an extended flashback of returning from a gang raid in New York City, and then they got back in New York City as the next song, and that has another really good piece of Tony Banks refrain in that, and it's almost like a reversed loop sound. It almost sounds like it's being recorded backwards and played forward in the beginning. It's really experimental in that, and it's, again, a brilliant track. A dream where his hairy heart is removed and shaved with a razor. Hairless Heart. Again, Hairless Heart. I don't know if Gabriel was particularly religious. He may be. But I'm thinking of the hair shirt, you know, and the penitent man, you know, like the story of Edward. I think it was Edward the First that walked from Canterbury to London to Canterbury in a hair shirt. Might not have been Edward the First. One of the early kings of England did it to prove that he was he killed when he killed or when he accidentally had his archbishop murdered by accident, and that's I see. 1 second, I'll get my phone because my brain. It was, of course, it was Thomas Becket, who was murdered in 1170 on 29th of December. King Henry II was the king I was thinking of. Sorry, I had to go Google that. I knew it in my head because, you know, I should know that stuff. But it just came to me now as we go. See, this is it. It came as we were chatting live on the show. See, notes. When you write notes and then you don't take notice of them. Anyway, So that's what. So, you penitent man. Get back to it. Sorry. Back to where I was coming from. And his first sexual encounter, counting out time. Oh man, what a great track that is. That as a young man, getting into my prime, as we all young men know, fascinated by the opposite sex, or the same sex, depending on what your taste is. Doesn't bother me. You sort of don't know what you're doing, do you? Like, it's like having a car and not knowing how to put it into first gear, right? And that's exactly the same thing with this. It's counting out time, and it's about basically about Kama Sutra. And when I saw Music Box do this live, the guy did a great explanation of this. This was a track before they played it, and it was so fantastic. Anyway, Rael's flashbacks end, and he finds himself in a long red carpeted corridor, people crawling towards a wooden door. Rael runs past them and exits via a spiral staircase. The Carpet Crawlers. That's the next song, The Carpet Crawlers. And that's got a brilliant lyrical refrain right at the beginning. The carpet crawlers heed their crawlers. You got to get out to get it. You got to get in to get out, which is like, again, sort of hippie-ish, but a brilliant piece of I don't know, is it alliteration because it's all the C's? Yeah. At the top of he enters a chamber with 32 doors, surrounded by people and unable to concentrate. The chamber of 32 doors. Again, see, I don't know what this actually means. I have pondered it, and I've pondered it, and I've pondered it. I don't know what the significance with 32 is. It might be in the age. I mean, who knows? He might have been 32 when he recorded this. I'd have to look into that, actually. Let's do some live research now. Let's do it now. Hold on a second. No, he was 24, so... Well, still, man, 24 and writing lyrics like this is crazy. So that's one hypothesis that came to my head that disappeared quite quickly. See how these things can just come and go in your head? Anyway, where was I? Rael finds a blind woman who leads him out of the chamber. Lily White Lilith. Okay, now Lilith is a ancient... I think it's a Roman god. It could be a Greek. Again, I'm not overly au fait with that. And she was I think like a harbinger of death, I think. And into another cave, the waiting room. Again, sort of like, again, it's all about, think about it, right? Chamber of doors, counting out time, the waiting room. There's all these sort of looking for things kind of, I mean, it's about sort of liminal spaces almost, isn't it? Like the cave, the carpeted corridor, waiting room, spaces between destinations. And I get a feeling that's Gabriel, because he was sort of like thinking about leaving the band, going on doing solo work. And this album could almost be probably the space between that, couldn't it? Like the waiting room, sort of, if you think about it deeply, the carpet crawl. Sorry, the waiting room, the Chamber of 32 Doors could be one album, maybe Selling England by the Pound, and then the waiting room is Lamb, and the space in between is his wanting to do solo stuff. Who knows, right? Where he becomes trapped by falling. Okay, blah blah blah. So the waiting room, where he becomes trapped by falling rocks. Anyway. Little piece of music called Anyway, it's tied in there. Rael encounters death. Here comes the supernatural anaesthetist. Now this is a... I don't know. How do I describe this as being one of the most interesting lyrical ideas ever, I reckon, for a prog album. It had an interesting birth, this piece of music, because... what's his name? Oh God, hang on. I've written it. 1 second. It had Phil Spector on this piece of music. Sorry, I went blank. Then I saw his hair in my head and went completely. And it's quite eerie. It's a fantastic lyrical play on death, isn't it? The supernatural anaesthetist. Isn't that fantastic? So a ghost that's going to put you to sleep, right? A Holy Ghost almost, I imagine. You could sort of see it that way. again, that's why I don't know if it's any religious images that he's trying to bring through here. It seems to me that there's a little bit of atheism and non-believing, non-Christian, not non-Christian, you know what I mean, like looking beyond the realms of organised religion in this album. And he escapes the cave. Rael ends up in a pool with the 3 lamia. The lamia are also another Greek or Roman tale. I think they are the one. They're their version of mermaids, that they pour you into the water, but not in the ocean, but like in the pools of water. You look in the water and you get pulled in by the lamia. Beautiful snake-like creatures, and has sex with them, but they die after drinking some of his blood. All right. Again, that's the lamia again. 1 second. Yep. I just checked, and my computer was like doing funny things. He leaves the pool in a boat. Silent sorrow in empty boats is the piece of music. Now, again, I think here Hackett has a bit of an influence. There's a lot of Mike Rutherford on bass in here, and a lot of it has a beautiful emptiness to it. Again, like other pieces of music, in The Cage, it's got this empty feel, and you can tell that the music was written separately a lot of the times to the actual lyric, but it marries so well. Anyway, where did I end up to? Yes, so he's drinking some of his blood. Now, we're going to leave that there for a second, in that lovely image of these snakes drinking, snake-like creatures drinking Rael's blood. We'll go and have a fresh hot cup of tea, take that taste out of our mouth, and move on to the other part of the album. I hope you've enjoyed this sort of walkthrough and talk through. We all, as I said, it will totally be wordy, but you know, it's worth doing. If you should be listening to the album and then listening to this, and it might take you those places. Anyway, talk to you soon on the other side, guys. Bye for now.
Head over to Hulu this March, where our new shows and movies will keep you streaming all month long. Catch the award-winning movie Poor Things, starring Emma Stone, Mark Ruffalo, and Willem Dafoe. Check out the new documentary, Freaknik, The Wildest Party Never Told, about the iconic Atlanta Street Party. And don't miss FX's Shogun, a reimagining of the epic tale, starring Anna Sawai. So, what are you waiting for? Go stream something new on Hulu.
Right, guys, so we're back. We ended the last part of the show with the image of Rael being feasted on by the lamia, the snake-like creatures that draw you into the water. He has sex with them first, and after drinking some of his blood, they die. He leaves the pool in a boat, as I said, silent sorrow in empty boats, and finds himself in a group of slipper men. Now, if you've ever had the pleasure of watching Peter Gabriel dressed as a slipper man, I haven't seen Gabriel do it. I saw the Music Box do it. They did the full exact live show, and we'll talk about the live show in a bit after I've done the detailed talk down of the plot. And basically he gets reborn out of this sort of cylindrical tube, very, very, very gynecological, is all I can say. And he's basically this deformed creature. Basically, like he has like his balloons, condoms filled with air, and balloons all over him. He's like a big sort of bulbous, weird. That's all I can describe it. So if you Google it, and Google Peter Gabriel Slipper Man, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And when they did it at the Hammersmith Odeon, whatever it's called now, the event Apollo, it's pretty bloody amazing. Really off-putting, actually, strangely enough. So the slipper men, distorted, grotesque men with all had the same experiences with the Lamia. So they've all been seduced by them, and he finds that he has become one of them. The arrival. So that's what he's coming through the tube. Right. It's again great piece of orchestral music. Rael finds John among the slipper men, who reveals the only way to become a human again is to visit Doctor Doktor Diaper and be castrated. And that's where the next song, A Visit to the Doctor, comes on. Again, I feel uncomfortable in this piece of music, but I always have done, because it's quite awkward and jarring. Both are castrated and keep their removed penises in containers around their necks. I told you Gabriel was on something, maybe. Again, I'm going to come to this point of being a self-analysis of himself. He's been castrated. He's castrated. His brother and himself castrate themselves. I think that could be, if we want to be really intellectual about this, that could be Gabriel, because he had to go back and finish the album lyrically. He didn't want to really do it. He'd gone away to do the soundtrack with the script with William Friedkin. I think he thinks I'm back here doing this. I'm castrating myself. I'm not whole because I'm not wanting to do this. And also at the same time, he's probably having issues with his wife, because his wife is going through had a very difficult birth, and that can make a lot of men feel very castrated in some respects, because they don't know how to help. They don't know how to be. And back then in the 70s, men were different, right? They weren't like they are now, where we're all touchy-feely, be there every minute. I'm sure that he wasn't, and that makes him feel a little bit emasculated, if you know what I mean. I'm reading that into it. And then the container is then taken by a raven, and he chases after it, leaving John behind. The raven. Here again, his masculinity has been stolen by this black bird. It's been whisked away into the air and away. So not only has he emasculated himself, but now he has no chance of repairing that emasculation. And he uses a bird as an image, because the raven is a bird of death. So the death of his sexuality, maybe. Who knows? I mean, I'm getting very deep here, aren't I, guys? Man, I'm going to lie down. He chases after it, leaving John behind. The raven drops the container into a ravine and into a rushing underground river. The ravine. And you can hear the water in that piece of music, by the way. It's quite intense. Rael walks alongside and sees a window in the bank above his head, which reveals his home amidst the streets and this is when the light lies down on Broadway. Nice refrain of the first bit. I'll read that again because I don't think I read it very well. Rael walks alongside the riverbank, sees a window in the bank above his head, which reveals his home amidst the streets. The light lies down on Broadway. And again, it's the same thing. It's the same. It's like da 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 da. But they just changed the lyric, of course. Faced with the option of returning home, he sees John in a river below him, struggling to stay afloat despite being deserted twice by John. Rael dives in to save him, and the gateway to New York vanishes, riding the scree. So again, it's almost like in my head, I picture. If you ever read Journey to the Centre of the Earth, or listen to it by the Rick Wakeman one, if you listen, there's a moment where they're all, piling down this river under the earth, and I have that sense of speed and rushing and burbling and can't take your breath, and it's hard to concentrate, and you think you can't keep your head above it, and you're bashing against the rocks, and it's very fast and twisty and turning. And that's what I get with this piece of music. Rael rescues John and drags his body to the bank of the river to turn him over to look at his face, only to see his own face instead in the rapids. It's all part of that. It's all part of that water. That again, he's using water. He's using water maybe as a metaphor of cleansing. So he's had his sexuality taken away. He feels emasculated. He's chased. It's been dropped into water to cleanse it. He's trying to chase it. He's cleansed himself, and his brother, who he finds obviously has issues with, because his brother keeps abandoning him. He sees that himself. So he wasn't chasing his brother along; he was chasing himself. His consciousness then drifts between both bodies and sees the surrounding scenery melting away into a haze. Both bodies dissolve, and Rael's spirits becomes one with everything around him. The final track, It. I don't know if I've made it sound too, but that's just takes your breath away. It really does. Anyone that's listening to this has got this far in both episodes. Obviously, either likes the program, and I'm glad you do, or you really do enjoy pushing your mind. And this album does push the mind. You don't need hallucinogens to enjoy it. You really don't. You don't need to be high, drunk. You just need to just be with it. It's an album that says, don't go away, Tone, John, Millsy, whoever's listening, don't go away. Sit there, listen, because I'm going to engage you in this crazy story about the singer's own life and what's happening, and that's how I read into it. I mean, I reckon I could write a book about this album, and I think it should be more thoroughly investigated, more thoroughly thought about, because the lyric is intense. The lyric story is incredible. He is a genius. That's not to say that the band aren't genius, because the music itself is also wonderful. The whole thing, the whole package is wonderful. Most of the music was developed through improvisation and jams. They had the Superman once was originally called Victory at Sea. Worked into the side, and then you had another known as the Evil Jam, which became the Waiting Room. The concept described by Gabriel is a format being split into self-contained song units. He thought the album contained some of the group's best material and the songs that was most proud of during the time of Genesis. And I think yes, Pete, absolutely, truly. Tony Banks thinks that The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway was the best thing they ever recorded together as a band with Gabriel. I have to agree with that completely. Carpet Crawlers developed at a time when Gabriel had written some lyrics but no music and been written for them. The band put together a chord sequence of D and E minor and F sharp minor with a roll from drums following through it. Gabriel spent hours and hours out of tuned piano in the house of his then wife Jill's parents in Kensington to develop the song. Jill spoke of Gabriel's particular fondness for the track Anyway and Lily White Lilith, developed from two previously unreleased songs named Frustration and The Light respectively. Hackett's guitar solo on Counting Out Time was played using EMS synth hi-fi guitar synthesizers. So you see, Frustration. So this is all. It really does. It really does come back to Pete's own mental condition and health at the time, and that's the same with all great lyrics, is it not? All great lyrics, unless they're sort of doo-wop and bebop and nonsense lyrics, most of the time they are deeply personal. Mixing on Ireland, Peter Gabriel asked Brian Eno, was working on his album Taking Tiger, to add synthesizer effects on the vocals for several tracks, including the Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging. Eno's work is credited on the liner notes of Eno's classic. It wasn't Eno, not bloody. Who did I say earlier? Oh no, I said the other guy, didn't I? The one with the big hair that went to prison. I was thinking of him, the Wall of Sound. No, I ain't Brian Eno. I apologise. I don't know why. My head, I had this image that it was Phil Spector. People were now listening going, you said Phil Spector. No, I meant Brian Eno. I'm sure I did, didn't I? Let me just quickly check that. This is... Unless he did do stuff. Oh my god. Give me a second. Personal. No, it was Eno. I get Eno and Spectre mixed up. Anyway, you'll forgive me, I'm sure, don't you? And if you don't forgive me, well, tough shit. Eno's work is credited, so yeah. Now, the sleeve design. We haven't come across the sleeve design yet, but the sleeve design is A thing of minimalist beauty. Can I say that? I'm going to grab my copy. Let me get my copy. 1 second. Drag my chair. Now I'm holding the 2018 reissue because my original copy is precious and I don't want to open it up. But basically it was done by Hypnosis, the art company that does a lot of work for Floyd. In departure from the company's previous album sleeves, it's not very comical or brightly coloured. It's monotonal. Basically, the front cover is a triptych, so 3 pictures. It's got Rael being pulled out of the water, out of a sort of, you can see him, and then you've got Rael and holding hands being pulled out of the water in the waiting room, and then you've got in the corridor of 32 doors, looks like. But the picture of him is blank on that, and it looks like he stepped out of the picture and he's looking at the middle picture, looking at the rescue. And on the back, you've got a smashed mirror, another corridor, and then you've got a picture of Raoul surrounded by lots of faces and no mouth. It is a beautiful piece of concept. I don't understand quite what all the pictures relate to. I'm sure that it will be somewhere. Originally designed by Paul Whitehead and used on Nursery Crime and Foxtrot, was replaced by the original designer Paul Whitehead, who worked on Nursery Crime and Foxtrot, was replaced with a new one in Art Deco style, George Hardy. The left picture on the front depicts Raoul in the area where in the rapids and riding Scree are set. That was, I thought so. And then, of course, when you open it up, you've got the whole story there with little panels of pictures in between. There's a lot of words in this. It will take you some time to get your head around it if you have a copy of it on vinyl. Also, when you pull the inner sleeve out, it's got very Art Deco. Both inner sleeves have got very Art Deco sort of imagery. The Genesis logo is a lot more sharp than it used to be. It sort of moves towards the more modern Genesis logo. And second, once you've seen the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway cover, you're not going to forget it in a hurry. It is a little bit cold, a little bit stark for the band that they usually are, but this is a different direction for them. Their first double album, concept album, first real sortie with Gabriel doing every lyric. I know he mainly writes the lyrics, but he did a lot of the lyric on this, all the lyrics on this one. It sort of really depicts its year, 1974. It has that. It also sort of really challenges you on whether you're gonna love the album or not. I think a lot of time with prog albums, it's all fluffy, fun and images, and people have in mind images of prog albums of being about dragons and wizards and all that nonsense, and that isn't the case. Not most of the time. So, it's not all, in the Court of the Crimson King, right? It's not all Brain Salad Surgery, but even Brain Salad Surgery has an album cover that really does challenge you, and it's the same with this one here. Now, as I said, the band considered releasing 2 albums as 2 single albums, 6 months apart, and they did that in Canada. And I said I thought I had a copy of that one. No, I didn't, but I don't now, because I looked thoroughly through my collection, and I've got a very large collection, guys. It took me for ages. You think I'd know more, wouldn't you? That I have everything that's in my collection, but no, not always. Now, so wonderful album. I hope that I didn't over talk the album. It is it's quite complicated. I'd love to think what you think of each of the tracks. I'd love to think what you think about what it actually means. If you're going to sit down and be an intellectualise this piece of music, and I think you should. I know it's not the normal heavy metal stuff that we do, but my love for prog, and that really all I want is for people to enjoy every form of music that they want to enjoy. It doesn't matter if it's heavy, fast, quiet, synth, pop, dance, reggae, punk, jazz. I don't really care, honest. I mean, the show's called Heavy Metal Tones, and that sometimes is a misnomer because I love my heavy metal. You know I do. I absolutely love it. The reason why I have the show, but at the same time also have other tastes, and prog is one of my main loves outside of that. I just want you to enjoy it. Now, the live show, it was sadly never videoed in full or filmed. It has been recorded. A couple of live albums were recorded. They weren't all the same gig, but there is a live album that was released on the Genesis Archives CD box set about 10 to 12 years ago, maybe longer. But the live show, when I saw it, was brilliant. So they did a documentary before where you could we watched the making of all the screenshots, because this is before the days of video screens. So all the images that appear behind the band, because they had 3 screens, they were all done with a slide projector. And it had to go, and it didn't always work. There had nights where the smoke would overtake the stage and you couldn't see the screens. There were times where the screens don't come on, didn't move. Some fabulous, and they worked very hard along with the guys at Hypnosis to produce these really interesting pieces of art that alone themselves were. They weren't, not like you could go to a video, to a picture library now and just take a picture. These people had to go and take the photographs, make them work on a large screen, because it had to be resolution, had to be very good. And the album was played in its entirety. And at the end, they played, I think, if I remember rightly, Watches in the Sky and Musical Box, I think was what they played, or Cinema Show. As the only other tracks that they did. Now, there was a big hoo-ha because Gabriel wanted the album played from beginning to end, and the band were like, well, we don't know whether people were going to accept a whole, show with just this one album that it's not been heard before. They took the risk, and it became one of their biggest ever tours. And I was sitting next to a guy in London earlier in the year at the Music Box show, and he'd said that he'd seen them in Canada without the video screens, in a small like scout hall kind of thing, because they didn't have any big enough venues in this particular town in Canada. And this guy happened to be on in London for a business trip and saw it was on. The same with me. I happened to be in London to visit my dad, and I saw the show was on. Had no idea. And for like 20 quid, it was, like $40 or whatever, but one of the best live shows I've ever seen. I got to see my favourite album all the way through with brilliant musicians. And honestly, I'm not a big Phil Collins fan, his voice. I never have done, never have been. I'm going to admit to that. People who know me know how I feel. But his drumming is impeccable. And on this album, where I was sitting, I was sort of in the balcony, 2 rows front, from the front of the balcony. And I could look down on on Collins. And he was just like arms were just splashing all over. He had such a dynamism about himself, just really incredible. And then, of course, Gabriel. I mean, obviously, the lead singer of Music Box is copying Gabriel. Move for move, he's watched whatever he can of this particular show. And it was, sometimes, when you go to, cover bands, and you just can't buy into it. It just doesn't. It just feels like and looks like a fat man like when I saw this Guns N' Roses tribute band, which is like some fat dude in a top hat playing /guitar. I couldn't buy into it. But with Music Box, I genuinely bought right into it. I was right in there. I was enthralled from beginning to end. I sang along to songs. A lot of the time, I close my eyes. I do what I do at home. I let myself fall into the music. It was warm. It was evening. I'd been out all day and had a few pints before I got in there. I didn't fall asleep, John. Didn't fall asleep. And it was just fantastic. But they did at the end. They did. Actually, we were really treated because they did Watcher in the Skies, they did Music Box, and they did Supper's Ready, which was amazing. So it was a really long gig, including the video documentary at the beginning about the making of the album and the making of the videos and the tour, and how that they also talked about the tour afterwards, where Gabriel left and Phil Collins had this laser that he would point into the audience so he could point out audience members and sing along with them, and how these days the health and safety probably wouldn't let you do that, but they did it back then, and the cost of the touring of the album was incredible. I don't think they would have made much money back on the tour itself, but the album, as I said, went platinum. It's a huge selling album now. Wasn't back then at first. But then, Genesis are not a band until like Gabriel left. They're not a band, or not even Gabriel. I'd say after probably, and then when they were free, or whatever it is, on from there up until things like Invisible Touch and all that I Can't Dance nonsense. That's when they made their money, I think, because they changed track, saw the wind was changing, and went somewhere else, and that's fine. They have their right to do so. Us hardcore fans might go bar humbug, shake our fists and sit in the past, but that's fine. Each into their own. I'm sure I've got friends of mine, big prog heads, who absolutely love Invisible Touch. All right? And tell me that I'm listening to it incorrectly. Fine, probably am. And one day I might even give it its credence and have a listen. You never know. It might be a bit hard going, but I'll do it. Anyway, rambling on. So the live show that followed this album, this tour of this album, controversial because very few bands now do whole of their album, a new album, start to finish, no breaks. You got to have faith in your audience, faith in your material, and let's be honest, balls the size of planets, because it doesn't take long, particularly nowadays, if an audience doesn't like what's going on, for a band to suddenly just change track, which is sad, isn't it? Because you should stand by your convictions. I'd hate to think that I was in a band, played all this stuff. I mean, I saw Metallica during the Death Magnetic tour. They came out late, mind you, and they were phoning it in, you could tell. And they wanted to play most of Death Magnetic and then also stuff from Saint Anger, and everyone just, I know, poor band, but they went ape shit. It's like booing and throwing things. And the band changed track and started playing, Trapped Under Ice and The One and all the classics, Enter the Sandman, all that stuff. Which is what we wanted to go and see. We wanted to see that, but I generally wanted to see Death Magnetic stuff as well, because I wanted to see new live stuff recorded, like new material. But there is a hardcore fan out there that will not have it. It's like I'm sure that there's times when the Eagles are playing Hotel California, and they're going, I wish we fucking bloody, or Maiden with Number of the Beast or whatever, They're like, oh God, I don't really want to put that in the set. But they know they have to. They know they have to because it made their fortune. It made who they are. And give them the opportunity to write The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway or Death Magnetic or Saint Anger or whatever, or Speed of Light or whatever that's Iron Maiden reference there. My most disliked Iron Maiden song. So you get the opportunity to do it because you've made your money and your fan base, and they're going to willingly let you do what you want. But at the same time, when you see them live, they're going to forgive you for doing Saint Anger or Lulu, because you're going to play Enter the Sandman and Trapped Under Ice and Creeping Death, right? Aren't you? Well, that's what they hope anyway. And if you don't, they're not going to forgive you. And certain fan bases are worse than others, I reckon. Like when I saw Iron Maiden, I've seen Iron Maiden so many times. When I saw them the first time in Sydney, here in Australia, 2008, they were supported by I think it was Lauren Harris was the support. So it was Steve Harris's daughter, so you weren't going to boo her. But there was a band before Lauren Harris, I don't remember what it was now, but there were people chucking things, they were booing, I mean, let's be honest, all they really wanted to come along and see is Maiden. They didn't want to see anyone else, and they were not going to they were going to let those support bands know it as well, and I think that's a bit cruel. I mean, I've been here, I've booed support acts, but only because they're crap. And only crap in my opinion, I should say. They're probably fantastic. I'm not up there playing them, am I? I'm not got a guitar in my hand and risking my reputation and my and sometimes life actually being up on those stages. But anyway, well, I digress. So they did the full album, brave that they were. Never did it again. Shame. It was a very short tour. They never played Australia, which is one of those things when I think about it. Now, Australia is a long way away, guys. Those who listen to me around the world, and I've got listeners all around the world. Yes, for a European band coming here, it's a long way, and it was even worse then, because travelling long distance then was a bit more arduous. Now, with business class and all this sort of stuff, and the fast jets, you can go from London to Perth in 17 hours, and then from Perth to Sydney in 5 or 6. It's not too bad. It's arduous. I've done it, many times, but it's not as bad as it was then. And so I hope that bands like Genesis, if they ever reform, and Pete, if you listen to this, please reform the band before Collins dies. He's not very well. God forbid, poor bugger, he's really unwell. I would love them to do it again, but they probably wouldn't do Lamb anyway. They'd probably do Foxtrot or Selling England, which would still be amazing, but the Lamb would be unbelievable. But it's quite an arduous piece of music, I would imagine, to play live. I can imagine it's not the sort of music that once you finish it, you go, yeah, let's do it again, because it's quite. I mean, there's a great, wonderful piece on the of oddness. Of instrumental piece that really does, I would imagine, take a lot of effort out of them, and you'll know what it is when you listen to it. I'm not going to give it away. I want you to listen to the album. You'll know which one I mean when you hear it. Don't skip it. Please don't skip it just because you think it's a bit strange. Let the strangeness flow over you, because it does tie in with the story of the album and Gabriel's concepts. Yeah, that's me for now. I would love to know what you think. If you do want to actually analyse the lyric of the songs, come to my Facebook page, Heavy Metal Tones, and message me. Let me know what you think. Just reach out. Tell me, do you like the album? What did you think about me doing a prog album on a heavy metal show? Did you like it? I hope you didn't mind it. I know it's my show and I'll do what I want to do, sort of mentality, but I also don't want to alienate any of my listeners. I really hope you enjoyed it. I loved thinking about it again. It's an album that if any reason for me to listen to, I'll take it. Any reason for me to think about it, I will. Try the deprivation thing. Try the hot bath if you've got a bath. Try the bedroom or the sofa, or wherever your music is set up. Keep in the dark, quiet. Noise cancelling headphones really help because they need to block out everything else around you. Obviously, be careful because, like me, I've done it before and got in a lot of trouble with my wife because I haven't heard her call me down for dinner, and she's coming upstairs screaming at me, and I did not see, because of the headphones are so good. I was so away in the music, I didn't know what was happening. But anyway, that's it. Just be careful. Do know your surroundings around you. Funnily now, I keep my phone by the side of me, and I said to my wife, text me. And when the phone lights up or buzzes, I'll know that it's dinner. Anyway, that aside, I hope you enjoyed lamb. I know I did. It's always good to have a little lamb on Sundays. This is a vegetarian saying that. Or the equivalent, veggie lamb on Sundays. I do play it mainly on Sundays, actually, strangely enough. It's a day that I enjoy to play it on Sunday afternoons, because it's when I'm off and I can relax. Anyway, that's enough for me this week. Next week's episode is quite an interesting one. It comes from a conversation that I had with my good friend John recently. And it's something that I've been thinking of a lot of late, because it's actually affected me and it's affecting a lot of people. And I think that it is something that needs to be said. So I hope you enjoy this. I'm also going to be interviewing the lead singer of Soilwork and Night Flight Opera this week. So eventually that'll be out on Metal Ruse. Once that's out and going, and it's been out for a few weeks, I will then upload it to the show here so that we can listen to it. Fans can listen to it without having to try and hunt it down through other websites. Anyway, talk to you next week, guys. Bye for now.